They laughed when he arrived, a lonely veteran, burdened by years of service and silent battles within his mind, walked into town with nothing but a battered backpack and his loyal dog trailing close behind. His shoulders were heavy, not just from the weight of his belongings, but from invisible scars of war. The townspeople stared as he stopped at the edge of a forgotten lot, where an old, rust-covered shipping container sat abandoned. To them, it was a joke. How could a man once celebrated as a protector of freedom now choose to live in a box of rust and metal? Neighbors whispered, children pointed, and adults chuckled, shaking their heads as if the sight was beneath their dignity. "Look at him," they muttered, "living with a dog inside a container? He must be crazy." But what they didn't see was the truth. The dog wasn't just a companion. He was a veteran's anchor, his last connection to life when everything else had slipped away. This animal had walked through storms of pain and shadows of despair alongside him. Where others abandoned him, the dog remained, silent, loyal, unshaken. Each night, as the town slept comfortably in their homes, the container glowed faintly with the flicker of a small lamp. Inside, the man whispered his nightmares into the darkness, and the dog lay by his feet, listening without judgment, protecting without fear. While the world mocked him, the animal stood as his guardian against loneliness. The laughter outside grew louder with each passing day. People smirked as they walked past, never stopping to think what courage it took for a broken soldier to stand again, even in the humblest of shelters. Yet fate has a way of turning ridicule into silence. A storm was coming, and when it arrived, it would test every soul in that town. The veteran's container, once ridiculed, would soon become the center of a story no one would ever forget, and the dog they dismissed as nothing more than an animal would prove to be a hero greater than them all. They laughed when he moved in, but soon they would beg to stand in silence before him. The container sat at the edge of town like an eyesore, rust eating away at its steel walls, weeds creeping up from the ground beneath. To outsiders, it was a piece of junk, unfit for human life. To the veteran, it was all he had left, and beside him always was his dog. The dog was lean, scarred, his fur patched in places where old wounds had healed unevenly. He walked with quiet dignity, his eyes sharp and alert, scanning every passerby as though he was still on a battlefield. The veteran often said nothing, but the dog's presence was enough, reminding him that even when stripped of everything, loyalty remained. The townspeople had never welcomed him. From the very first day he arrived, whispers filled the streets. "He's lost it," someone said. "A man of his age, living in that box? What a shame." Others shook their heads and pitied him, though their pity carried the sting of mockery. Some laughed outright, making jokes as they passed by. "Is that a house or a coffin?" The veteran ignored them, but the dog never did. Whenever the laughter grew too loud, he stood in front of his master, teeth slightly bared, as though daring anyone to cross a line. People stepped back quickly when they saw that glint in the animal's eyes. They mocked from a distance, but not a single one dared come closer when the dog was near. Inside the container, life was hard. There was no electricity, no running water, only the dim glow of a lantern and the bitter chill that seeped through the walls at night. The veteran gathered scrap wood and metal from abandoned lots, shaping them into crude furniture. Each time he hammered a nail into place, the dog lay nearby, watching silently, as though supervising the creation of their home. When hunger gnawed at him, the man skipped meals, saving what little food he had for the dog. Sometimes, all they were scraps from trash bins or donations given by a few kind souls who didn't join in the town's laughter. No matter how little it was, the veteran always fed the animal first. "You kept me alive when nothing else did," he whispered once, rubbing the dog's head. "So long as I breathe, you'll never go hungry." The dog seemed to understand. He pressed his head against the man's knee, tail wagging slowly, a quiet thank you that needed no words. Days stretched into weeks. Each morning, the veteran rose before the sun, collecting odd jobs in the town, fixing fences, chopping firewood, patching roofs. He didn't speak much, only did what was asked, accepted a few coins, and returned to his container. And always the dog walked beside him, step for step, like a shadow bound by loyalty. But despite his effort, the gossip never stopped. To the townspeople, his hard work wasn't enough. They saw only the container, only the rust, only the shame of a man who once wore a uniform now living in scraps. Children threw pebbles at the container when they passed, daring each other to get closer. The dog's growl would send them scattering, but the laughter echoed long after they were gone. The veteran pretended not to care. He had fought wars, faced enemies that wanted him dead. So the ridicule of townsfolk should have meant nothing. Yet at night, when he sat inside the quiet container with the lantern casting shadows on the steel walls, he couldn't help but feel the sting. His medals, once shining symbols of bravery, now lay buried in the bottom of his bag, gathering dust. What good were medals in a world that had forgotten his sacrifice? Only the dog reminded him of worth. Every time he opened his eyes from a nightmare, gasping in the dark, the dog was there, ears perked, watching, waiting, as if to say, "You're not alone." When the tremors of memory shook him, the animal leaned against his side, grounding him in the present. And so the man endured. He built shelves out of broken wood, hammered rusted nails into crooked tables, and slowly turned the container into something resembling a home. The dog followed every move, lying in corners, standing guard at the door, and curling up by his side when exhaustion finally overtook him. But outside, the town's laughter grew crueler. A soldier turned beggar, they sneered, living with a mutt in a junkyard palace. They didn't see the bond that pulsed stronger than blood between a man and his dog. They saw only failure, only decay. Then, a storm began to brew on the horizon, not just in the sky, but in the destiny of the town itself. For while they mocked and scorned, life was preparing a trial that would silence their laughter forever. The rusty container stood silent against the backdrop of the town, an unwanted landmark everyone avoided. Yet within those metal walls, a transformation was quietly unfolding. One nail, one board, one small act of resilience at a time. And at the heart of it all, always watching, always guarding, was the dog. The days passed slowly, but each one carried a rhythm. At dawn, the veteran rose to begin his work. He scavenged through piles of discarded lumber, twisted metal rods, and thrown away furniture. To others, they were worthless scraps. To him, they were building blocks of hope. The dog padded alongside, his sharp eyes scanning the streets. Where people saw trash, the man saw potential. Where people saw failure, the dog saw purpose. Inside the container, the transformation began. A crooked plank became a table. Bent metal was hammered flat into shelves. The veteran patched the cracks where the cold wind seeped in, using pieces of cloth stitched together by tired hands. Though the work was rough, every detail mattered, and as the man worked, the dog sat nearby, observing with quiet intensity, as if making sure every nail was placed correctly. The laughter outside continued. Some neighbors stopped to watch from a distance, shaking their heads. "He thinks that box is a home," they whispered. Children giggled, daring one another to run up and bang on the walls before sprinting away. Each time, the dog leapt to his feet, barking sharply, his body tense and ready. The mockery never ended, but inside the container, something unbreakable was being forged. The veteran's bond with the dog grew deeper with every passing day. At night, when silence pressed against the steel walls, he spoke aloud to the only companion who truly listened. He told stories of the battlefield, of brothers in arms lost to time and tragedy, of nights when the world felt like it was ending. The dog never interrupted, never judged, only leaned closer, pressing his warm body against the veteran's side. That simple weight kept him grounded when memories threatened to drag him back into darkness. Food was scarce. The veteran often returned from his day's labor with nothing more than bread crusts or leftover scraps tossed his way. Yet no matter how little there was, the dog always ate first. The man tore small portions from his share, placing them gently in front of the animal. Hunger gnawed at his own stomach, but he smiled each time he saw the dog wag his tail in gratitude. For him, survival wasn't about feeding himself. It was about making sure the creature that saved his spirit never felt abandonment. And the dog, in return, gave him courage. When nightmares woke the veteran in cold sweats, the animal pressed closer. When tremors shook his hands, The dog rested his head on his lap until the shaking stopped. When the world mocked, the animal's steady gaze reminded him that worth wasn't found in approval, but in loyalty. The container, once an empty shell of rust, began to change. Light peeked through windows cut crudely into its sides, patched with clear plastic. A small garden sprouted just outside, where the man used old cans to grow herbs and vegetables. With each small change, the container began to look less like a box and more like a home. Yet the town refused to see it. People sneered as they walked past, muttering about the crazy soldier and his junkyard dog. They laughed louder when rain leaked through the roof or when a veteran was seen hauling broken boards across town. Building a palace out of trash, they mocked. But the veteran paid them no mind. He worked harder, his hands blistered, his back aching, while the dog never left his side. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the veteran sat at the doorway of the container, staring at the sky painted in streaks of red and gold. The dog sat next to him, their silhouettes framed against the fading light. For a moment, everything felt still. "Do you know something?" the man whispered, his voice hoarse but steady. "They think we're broken, but I think we're stronger than all of them." The dog tilted his head as though he understood. His tail brushed against the ground once, twice, and then he rested his head on the veteran's leg. In that quiet exchange, a truth was spoken without words. Together, they were unshakable. The world outside could laugh, but inside that container, something powerful was growing. Not just a home, but a bond that could not be rusted, mocked, or destroyed. The people of the town did not know it yet, but soon they would. Their laughter would be silenced, and the very dog they dismissed would become the savior none of them expected, because destiny was already moving closer. And when the night of fire came, every soul in that town would look upon the veteran and his dog with eyes wide open, not with mockery, but with awe. The night of the storm began like any other. Dark clouds crawled across the horizon, rolling in heavy and menacing. The town below paid little attention. Families gathered in their warm homes. Children played, and laughter echoed from the tavern down the street. Only the veteran and his dog noticed a shift in the air, that uneasy silence that comes before disaster. The container creaked as the wind picked up, rattling its steel sides. Inside, the veteran lit his small lantern and sat with his dog at his feet. The rain came first, heavy, relentless drops pounding against the roof like hammers. Thunder roared, shaking the ground. The dog raised his head, ears twitching, eyes fixed on something distant, something no one else could yet sense. Then came the scream. It pierced through the storm, high, desperate, filled with terror. The veteran froze, his blood running cold. Outside, smoke began to rise. Through the sheets of rain, flames flickered at the far end of the neighborhood. A house was burning. Chaos erupted in the streets. Families poured out of their homes, shouting, running, pointing at the fire consuming the wooden house. Neighbors tried to form lines with buckets, but the wind fanned the flames faster than water could fight it. People yelled for help, voices breaking in panic. And then another scream tore through the storm, smaller, weaker, but far more terrifying. A child's cry. "She's still inside," a woman shrieked, falling to her knees. "My daughter, she's still in there." The crowd froze. The fire roared higher, licking at the sky, turning the night into a nightmare of orange and black. No one moved. Fear rooted them to the ground, eyes wide, hearts racing. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking, the flames too wild. No one dared step forward, except the dog. Before the veteran could even react, the animal shot forward, a blurred determination cutting through the storm. He sprinted into the smoke, into the fire without hesitation. The crowd gasped, some screaming, others shouting in disbelief. "Stop him," someone yelled. "He'll be killed." But the dog was already gone, swallowed by the inferno. The veteran's heart pounded in his chest. For a split second, he stood frozen, and then something deep inside him roared awake. He had faced bullets, bombs, and battlefields. He would not let fire take what loyalty had given him. Grabbing his coat, he plunged into flames after the dog. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, burning his lungs with every breath. The heat was suffocating, walls crackling and collapsing around him. He could barely see, his vision clouded by ash and darkness. But through the chaos he heard it, the desperate barking of his dog, guiding him forward. Stumbling, coughing, he followed the sound. In the corner of a collapsing room, the dog stood, teeth clamped onto the sleeve of a terrified little girl, dragging her toward the door. Tears streaked down her soot-covered face as she clung to the animal's fur. The veteran rushed forward, scooping the child into his arms. The dog barked once, sharply, before darting ahead, leading the way out through the smoke-filled hallway. Together they ran, flames clawing at their heels, the house groaning as it threatened to collapse entirely. With one final push, they burst through the door and out into the storm. The crowd gasped, screams turning into cries of relief as the veteran emerged from the fire, the child safe in his arms, the dog limping but alive by his side. The woman, the child's mother, fell to her knees, sobbing as she clutched her daughter. "You saved her," she whispered through tears, reaching out to the veteran. "You saved my baby." But the man shook his head. His eyes dropped to the dog, standing firm despite his singed fur and smoke-stung eyes. "He saved her," the veteran said hoarsely. "I only followed." Silence fell over the crowd. The same people who had laughed, mocked, and ridiculed him now stared in awe. No one spoke. No one dared. Because in that moment, they realized what they had failed to see all along. The strength of a soldier and the heart of a dog. The storm raged on, but the fire slowly died under the weight of the rain. And when the smoke cleared, nothing in the town would ever be the same. The rusty container was no longer a symbol of shame. It was now a monument to resilience. The veteran and his dog had turned ridicule into respect, mockery into admiration. The town, once blind, now saw clearly. Dignity and loyalty are not measured by wealth or status, but by the courage to stand in the flames when no one else will. That night, the laughter stopped, and in its place came silence, reverence, and quiet, unshakable respect for a man and his dog who had proven themselves greater than any fire. The fire was gone. The storm had passed. Yet the memory of that night burned brighter in the hearts of every witness than the flames that had nearly destroyed their town. The veteran returned his container, the same rust-covered box everyone had ridiculed. But now no one laughed. They looked at it differently, as though the rust no longer mattered, as though the walls of steel carried a story greater than any mansion in town could hold. People who once mocked him now approached with lowered heads. They offered food, blankets, and supplies. They brought wood and tools, hoping to help prepare the container that had sheltered such courage. Some even apologized, their voices trembling, ashamed of the words they had once thrown so carelessly. But the veteran asked for nothing. He had never wanted pity, and he didn't crave admiration. All he wanted was peace, and his dog, always at his side. The animal carried his burns with quiet dignity. His fur was singed, paws raw from the fire, but his spirit was untouched. When neighbors tried to pet him, he stood tall, his eyes still sharp, protective, reminding everyone that he belonged to one man and one man alone. Together, they continued their life in the container. But something had changed. Where once there was silence and mockery, now there was respect. Children who had thrown stones now waved shyly when they passed. Adults who had laughed now crossed the street just to greet him. The town that had turned its back finally saw him, not as a broken soldier living in rust, but as a man of unshakable strength. And yet, the veteran remained humble. When asked why he risked his life, why he had charged into the fire, he always gave the same answer. "Because my dog went first, I only followed." Those words spread like wildfire. People whispered them in markets, repeated them at dinner tables, and passed them on to their children. In time, the town began to honor not only the veteran, but the bond he shared with his animal. For in that bond was a lesson no one could deny. True loyalty cannot be bought, and true courage cannot be faked. The container, once seen as a symbol of failure, became a place of pilgrimage. People came not to gawk, but to remember, to remind themselves that greatness often hides where the world refuses to look, in the shadows, in the broken, in the places no one values. The veteran and his dog never sought fame, never demanded recognition. They simply lived, side by side, their days filled with quiet routine, their nights warmed by the light of a lantern and the comfort of shared silence. And maybe that was the greatest lesson of all, that dignity is not found in wealth, that home is not measured in bricks or glass, but in love and loyalty, that heroes are not always the ones with medals pinned to their chests, but sometimes the ones who walk unnoticed, carrying scars in silence, with a faithful dog at their side. They laughed when he moved into a rusty container, but in the end, it was his dog who showed them what true courage looked like, and no one laughed again.